If only men looked up at the sky, they would see different things. Not the things they usually see, the blackened asphalt, the yellow leaves, the puddles. No, they would see different things. They would see the cockpits of planes glittering in the sun, clouds frolicking like dolphins in love, flower-filled terraces, sheets hung out to dry on washing lines. They would also see a young man standing in pants and t-shirt on the terrace of a small loft, on the top floor of a fascist-era apartment building. He is leaning on the handrail, looking down. If he looked up, the young man would see a dark, unidentified object slowly but inexorably approaching. Behind him, his girlfriend is lying asleep. And inside his girlfriend, someone else is asleep. Someone the young man doesn't yet know, but will get to know in 3 months' time. Hard to say why he's woken up so early. Maybe he's feeling nervous, because it's not long now till the prize ceremony. The young man is a writer at the beginning of his career, so he won't be offended if we call him the beginner. That's what he is, because he's written and published just one novel, but one that hit the bullseye. The work of a young man who already seems mature, as the critics have been at pains to point out.
On the other side of the city, a full bladder drew the attention of the owner of the body in which it was imprisoned. This owner was a thin, white-haired man who insisted on being called the Master. The Master groped on the bedside table for the lamp switch, causing a tottering pile of books on a little table to fall. He managed to locate the switch, but the lamp did not come on. The fuse had blown again. When he won the prize, he would have that fixed. Damn and blast! The Master felt a stab of pain at the level of the perineum. Even though they had taken out the stitches more than a month ago, it still hurt. Heading for the bathroom, he all at once realized, or recalled, at the Master's age they amounted to pretty much the same thing, that the flushing of the toilet the day before had let him down. Fortunately, he now saw his old flannel slippers, nibbled as a donkey's ears, so he put them on and went out into the cool of the morning. The estate was bathed in a cold, transparent light. Tall grass besieged the pigeon house, which needed a coat of paint, but not today, afterwards. After the prize, after the victory, when it was all over. He lowered the slack elastic of his pyjamas and at last gave himself up to the sweet relief of urination. During the operation, the Master contemplated the majesty of the age-old pines. One in particular filled him with pride, the one he had chosen as the target of his foaming jet. Being a man of letters and not of the jungle, the Master was not to know that the tree was sick. Millions of greenflies were emptying the trunk from inside, reducing it to a sickening mush. By a cruel, subterranean analogy, the same thing was happening in the Master's exhausted body, inside which millions of tumorous cells, lurking tenaciously in the prostate, removed, though belatedly, were proliferating in his organism, joining forces in metastases that would soon attack his old bones and reduce them, like the cedar on which he was peeing, although rather more quickly. And this, in spite of the encouraging opinion which a well-known neurologist would soon be expressing during his check-up, marked down in his secretary's diary for that very morning.
Elsewhere, a beautiful young woman closed behind her the door of a house in a residential neighborhood with a liberating slam. For the man universally referred to as the writer, this was the most beautiful moment of the day. Most beautiful because the writer, the third and last finalist for the prize, could only write in the morning. As he waited for the coffee to rise, the writer looked through the sheaf of newspapers and found an article about the prize. He looked at it. In the dead centre of an imaginary triptych, which he formed with the other two, there was an old photograph of him, younger and bolder than he was now, equipped with an invincible smile, worn jeans, and creased shirt. Beneath it a caption, 46 years old, writer. His photograph was mounted between the two others in a forced iconic cohabitation which gave him a hemmed-in feeling. The other two photographs captured an old man with unkempt hair and a mean-looking face, and a young man with a ridiculous goatee and an expression of impunity, or was it stupidity, typical of youth. Even though he knew both of them, the sight of those faces nauseated him. The writer immediately went on to read the article. The author commented on the trio, vaguely summarized the 3 books in contention, and finally speculated wildly on the likely winner of the prize. The commentator considered the old man, whom in a couple of passages he also called the master, though not without a streak of irony, thought the writer, to be out of the running, and the writer to be the favourite. The writer skipped to the last sentence. Even though victory seems within reach, the game is far from over. To win the prize, the writer will have to watch out for the beginner. But if the writer had to watch out for the beginner, who did the beginner have to watch out for?
On the terrace of his loft, a dark object was approaching, an object the beginner could not see because he was looking down. He was thinking about the prize. The question is, as he closed behind him the massive glass door and drew the heavy curtain, could the beginner imagine the fearful crash which, in a fraction of a second, would shatter the window into 1,000 pieces? No, he couldn't. You can bet on it.
This is your prostate. What is? In the prestigious clinic of an even more prestigious Roman urologist, the master had answered mechanically. His attention had come to rest on a poster just behind the urologist's armchair. Where had he seen that painting? This. The urologist pointed with the tip of his pen to a darker area floating in the grey sea of the scan, a kind of lunar crater shaped like a chestnut. His prostate, as shown by the ultrasound. It was a reproduction of a painting. In the centre, a man standing on a rock. From every part of the picture, hundreds of creatures, fish, birds, reptiles, were converging on him. And in this dark patch, in the Wien Museum in Karlsplatz, that was where he had seen it, is the tumour. But didn't you take it out? Well, of course we took it out. This is the image of the prostate we removed, and this is the area affected by the carcinoma. Do you see? The master could not see. It was a painting by Oscar Lasker, St. Francis preaching to the birds. Anyway, look, a cancer of the prostate at your age isn't a rare occurrence. Hypnotized by the painting, the master felt as if the spaceship of his youth were abducting him in a cone of light and carrying him back in time to Vienna, the prostate still in its place, a raging snowstorm beating down on the city and on his young shoulders. Floundering in the storm, he had headed straight for the massive building at the far end of the park. He had pushed open the door and gone in. Wooden floors and warmth, light and silence. A museum. It was deserted. The master had pushed on inside, starting to walk through the warm, desolate rooms, until he had noticed a girl standing motionless in front of a painting. The master had come up behind her to get a better look at both the girl and the painting. The painting was St. Francis Preaching to the Birds by Oscar Lasker. The girl was very beautiful, and she was crying. More than 30% of 50-year-olds given post-mortems present signs of a carcinoma in the prostate. The master ignored this bothersome interference. Without a second thought, he had asked her, "Why are you crying?" "Because St. Francis was good, the girl had replied. In 80-year-olds, the figure reaches 70%. When they left the museum, it was still snowing. She had put her arm through his. They had taken shelter in a cafe near the Nachtmacht, where they had laughed, drunk hot tea, and eaten Zakatotta. Without a prostate, you will encounter a number of small inconveniences. They had ended up in a pension behind the opera house and made love all night, while outside it had snowed without respite. Such as impotence. Are you listening to me? I was saying that without a prostate you will encounter a number of inconveniences, such as impotence and incontinence. Am I going to piss in my pants? You may have problems with urination. Are you saying I'll have to wear incontinence pads? Doctor, I'm in the running for a very important prize. There's a strong possibility I'll win it. I can't risk pissing myself on stage. Well, it's just a matter of doing some simple exercises. My secretary will give you an information leaflet, along with a measuring cup and a urination diary. What the hell is a urination diary? It's a diary in which you note down the frequency with which you urinate and the volume of urine. It's a very useful tool. Anyway, don't worry. You have in front of you, I won't say a bright future, but at least a future, which isn't to be sniffed at. The master paid the secretary for the consultation. 2 more like this, and the advance from the small publishing company would be gone. The secretary handed over the urination diary, a little notebook with a dark cover, and an anonymous-looking plastic measuring cup. Of the 2 things, he couldn't have said which was the more demeaning. The secretary came to his aid. "Don't worry, it comes in a bag," she said, inserting the measuring cup into the top of the bag and immediately extracting it again, as if the bag could bite.
There was a fearful thud, and glass showered the room like dew. "Darling!" The crash had woken the girlfriend. "Here." He gently moved the curtain, then drew it right back. A huge black bird lay lifeless on the terrace, its eyes a cobalt blue, its stiff legs pointing skywards, its wings outspread as if crucified. "That's disgusting. What is it?" Standing in the doorway, her breasts pushing against her nightdress, the girlfriend looked on in horror as the beginner walked towards the bird. He was silent for a while. A parrot. At that precise moment, something inexplicable happened. The shoebox jumped, and the beginner, who had been planning to consult the yellow pages in search of a good taxidermist as soon as he got home, took fright, pulled over and cautiously opened the box. From under the lid, electric eyes were staring at him with a look of hatred. Back home, the beginner came out of the shower and stared at his naked body in the mirror. He wasn't looking well. Lately, because of the prize, he had to put up with an exhausting number of events and presentations which always ended in cocktails. Almost a month had passed like that, during which the beginner had eaten out every night. He would return home with aching feet, ears humming with the rumble of stupid questions and the clinking of glasses and plates. Yet, in spite of his swollen belly, in spite of the fact that even the girlfriend had reprimanded him in a recent quarrel, "You've changed," he didn't feel as if he had changed. Since the publication of his book, something had certainly happened to him, and not just to his physical appearance. But he wouldn't call it a change. No. More like an evolution. The beginner came out of the bathroom in his dressing gown and looked at the parrot in his cage in the middle of the room. On the way back home, having overcome his fright at that unexpected resurrection, the beginner had stopped at a pet shop and chosen a big cage, the biggest they had in the shop. The beginner had also bought a perch, an expensive manual on the care of parrots, and 2 food troughs. Cautiously, the beginner approached the cage. The bird seemed stiff and distant, as if stuffed. The beginner heard the creaking of the lift and recognized the girlfriend's energetic steps. The key turned in the lock. "Hi, darling." Her eyes settled on the voluminous cage. "What is this? A joke?" "No, a present."
According to an unwritten code, those competing for the prize were not supposed to put in an appearance at the academy before the ceremony. The master was perfectly well aware of this, but he was also aware that he wouldn't get another chance. He rang, and as soon as someone came to open up, he crossed the threshold of the academy with his head down. The intern, who was working there, stammered something, but was pushed back by the weight of this old dehorned bull. The president isn't here, he's busy." By the time the intern and the secretary had thrown themselves at him and tried to tackle him, it was too late. The master was already inside. The president looked at him as you might look at a neighbour who comes down late at night in his pyjamas to complain about the racket you're making in your apartment, and with a nod of his head indicated to them that they could leave him alone with the old goat. In one way or another he would manage. "What do you want? You know that finalists aren't supposed to come to the academy." The master, too busy to search in his leather bag, tipped out the contents on the president's desk. In order, a bunch of keys, a gas bill, a dry cleaner's slip, the urination diary, a poetry booklet, and at last he found what he was looking for. "What's that?" The master waved the accused object in front of the president's nose. "Look!" The president looked, but saw only a faded black-and-white image that could have been a frame taken from stock footage of the moon landings. "What is it?" "A scan." "Male or female?" "It's a tumour of the prostate." I'm sorry." "Is that all you can say?" "Oh, what am I supposed to say?" "You really don't understand, do you? There won't be any more prizes for me." "Oh, don't say that. This year is the last. I have 2 months, 3 maximum. They've told me it's incurable." The master put the fingerprint-smeared scan back in the pocket of his wallet, rested his chin on his chest, and started crying. "Oh, come on, don't get too down. If there's anything I can do—" "There is something. Listen, I deserve it." No, not that. You can't ask me that." "Oh, yes, I can. If there's one person in this country who deserves to win the prize, it's me." "What do you mean?" "I was with the avant-garde when everyone was with tradition. I came back to tradition when everyone was with the avant-garde. I've always turned my back on the big publishers, even though they all wanted me." "Don't raise your voice." "I'm in all the anthologies. The critics have written pages and pages about me. I've deserved goblets, plaques, cheques, reissues. You should be grateful you're a finalist, considering what an awful book you wrote." "How dare you? My last book is a masterpiece. Do you even read the books, or do you just give them prizes? Did you read last year's winner? You handed over the prize in your fat hands. Did you actually read it? Get out."
The sun had gone down, but the light still hung over the city like a promise of eternal life. The writer rode up to the gate of the residential neighborhood where he lived. The sprinklers hummed obediently. Lights indicated the way to his house like those leading to the emergency exit on a plane. He noticed that the second wife's Fiat 500 wasn't there. The door opened, and the Filipino looked him up and down with a disapproving expression. "The Senora?" the writer asked. "Senora hospital." "Is she ill?" "Mother ill." "Mother of Senora?" said the writer, who regressed linguistically without even realizing it whenever he talked to the Filipino. No, your mother. It was then that the writer remembered painfully and intensely that he had not had his mobile with him since the morning. He rushed into his study and found his smartphone exactly where he'd left it. The display showed 26 missed calls. At that very moment, the phone vibrated. The writer pressed answer. "Where on earth have you been?" It wasn't the second wife, but the president of the academy. "They've been looking for you all day. Your press officer has been getting hysterical. They're all here waiting for you. You're the only one missing." So he hadn't only forgotten the phone, he'd also forgotten the unmissable joint presentation with the other authors organised by the Academy, one of the crucial stages in the lead-up to the ceremony. "My mother hasn't been well. She's in hospital." "Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like us to postpone?" No, send a taxi. I'll be right there."
In the persistent silence of the empty apartment, the beginner stared at his parrot shut up in its cage. He seemed to detect in the bird's eyes something like a stern judgment. The beginner turned away to avoid that gaze, but as he turned, he felt as if he were being watched. Exactly the same distressing sensation he had felt in London when, in the middle of the street outside his hotel, he had failed in his loyalty to the girlfriend by sticking his tongue into the mouth of the translator of his novel. Unfortunately, there was no time to indulge in that transgressive memory. He had to change and rush to the event. A theatre full of people was waiting for him, and the beginner, if he wanted to win, had to be on time.
For anyone entering only now, the man in the middle of the stage is the writer. He wears his hair tousled like a boy's, and he's elegant, but with a kind of scruffy elegance. "Where do you get the ideas for your novels?" the president asks. "It's the ideas that get me," smiles in the auditorium. The president of the Academy nods serenely. But then what else could he do? He could only trust that answer. He certainly couldn't know where the writer really gets his ideas. Nobody can really know where a writer gets the ideas for his novels. Not even the writer himself. Except ours. He knew.
While the beginner was trying to shield himself from the bright lights, in the small bathroom of a one-room apartment, a tester, previously soaked in urine, was turning blue. At the moment, however, the beginner had no way of knowing this fact, or the related implications it would have for his future life. Talking of moments, the beginners had now arrived. How and when did you first become interested in writing? I always thought of being a writer, even before I actually started writing. Thank you. And now let's come to you.
The president had turned to the master, who had eyes like swimming pools filled with rainwater and could not see from here to there. "Earlier," the president went on, "in presenting your book, I said that its poetic origins are evident in many of its pages, and you know that, according to the rules, the authors cannot read their own works. However, if your colleagues won't be upset with me, I know you have some unpublished poems." The master nodded smugly. "Please." The master stood up somewhat clumsily and walked towards his pulpit. The lights dimmed until all that remained on the stage was a Caravagesque face. Silence fell over the auditorium. The master dug his glasses out of his pocket again. He cleaned them on his shirt tail, which was sticking out of his trousers, and put them on. He searched in his jacket pocket and took out his notebook. He opened it. He closed it. He opened it again. The differences that exist between a conventional imitation moleskin notebook and a urination diary would not have escaped a trained eye. But to weak eyes, looking for an object in a dark room, certain fragile similarities can become fatal. Leaving home in a mad rush, The master had committed a fatal error. He now stood at the lectern in front of the packed auditorium with his urination diary in his hand. Time flowed like liquid, emptying the space of his consciousness and filling the space of the theatre, as he cleared his throat and read in a steady voice, "Time, 5:30, volume, 340 millilitres, urination, voluntary, intensity, moderate, urgency, pressing, notes, farted." The master stared with his little eyes into the auditorium. All he saw was a kind of human vineyard, rows and rows of heads turned towards him. The theatre was silent, holding back from delivering its verdict. The president started clapping in a somewhat lukewarm manner at first, but eventually triggering a thunderous round of applause from the audience. The master was a poet.
You know that exercise they do in theatre workshops and in workplace groups to increase collective harmony and mutual trust among the members? Blindfolded or with our eyes closed, we let ourselves fall backwards into the arms of the person behind us. The only person into whose arms the writer would have let himself fall backwards was the publisher. That was why, when the publisher had invited him to lunch in a restaurant not far from the Via Borghese, the writer had been trusting. And when, after octopus and jelly with potatoes and a fillet of monkfish and a bottle of Sauvignon, the publisher had suggested they go for a walk in the zoo to clear their heads, the writer let himself fall backwards into the publisher's arms. "How many votes do we have?" the writer asked. 130 for sure. "And how many do we need to win?" 150. "Should we beware of the master?" "You mean the old man?" The writer nodded. The publisher shook his head. "The master's all washed up. He won't even get to the ceremony." "But he's a finalist." "He's sick. He has cancer." "Are you sure?" "How do you know?" "I have my sources." "Well, that's good, isn't it?" "No, it's bad. If he gave an interview about his illness, he could gain votes." "I hadn't thought of that." "I had. Thinking for my authors, of my authors," he corrected himself, "is my job. Anyway, his publisher's a small one. He doesn't scare me." "And what about the beginner?" "He's the horse to bet on." "But his book's no great shakes, is it?" "Have you read it?" "No." "Read it. Now there's a book." "And how many votes do they have?" 120, 130, more or less, like us. "And how come they've got so many?" "It's his first book. And when it's your first book, they forgive you everything. Don't you remember?" "No." "Listen, I'm going to be frank. We've known each other for 30 years. You know how much I respect you as a man and how much I admire you as an artist. You also know that a powerful press office and the biggest publisher on the market aren't enough by themselves. You also need the books. And yours, no offense intended, isn't a good book. In fact, your last 3 books were nothing to write home about. You have to win." "Tell me what I have to do." "I will, when the time is right." A writer is strong only when he is writing. He is respected and feared as long as the others don't know what he is writing. The writer wasn't strong for a simple reason. He was not writing. But it wasn't one of those terrible writer's blocks that reduce writers to impotence. No, it was nothing like that at all. It wasn't that our writer wasn't writing now, at this precise moment, or even during this period of time, or in the last few years. He really wasn't writing. Or rather, well, let's be quite open about this. He had never written. The writer was not the author of his last novel, the one with which he was competing for the prize, nor of the others that he had published. His novels were not his. So whose were they? As soon as he had arrived in the city from the provinces, he really had tried. Big novels filled with love affairs, lonely, desperate men throwing stones at the stars. That was how he imagined the stories he would one day write. Corduroy jackets with patches at the elbows, long walks in autumnal parks, aged rum, dipping his croissant into his cappuccino at dawn after a night spent scouring the bars, studying the transsexuals and street cleaners to gain an insight into the darkest, most brutish of minds. In short, a time when he still desired to write more ardently than to become a writer. But things had worked out differently. His novels had been born as blind as kittens. His stories had kept slipping away from him. He had tried to write. Talent isn't a gift, it's the conviction that you are better than the others. That was what he'd thought, what he'd kept telling himself. But he'd had to think again. It really was a gift, one that he, who had wanted it so much, hadn't been given. Of course he was good at typing, copying out manuscripts onto the computer. He would add a few commas, correct little typos, start a new paragraph. Nothing more. Now the writer walked down the long corridors of the clinic, which smelt of mashed potatoes and disinfectant, led by a middle-aged nun who gestured to him to go in through the last door on the right. The writer has done everything to keep bad things out of his life. He has learnt to turn the pillow onto the side that's less creased, to winter somewhere warm and spend the summers somewhere cool. In other words, for him the glass is never half full, but always full. Full to the brim. The day of his divorce? A liberation. His father's death? The deposition of a weary king. In all these years, the writer has been the personal gardener of his own success. He has carefully mown, watered, and fenced off the evergreen lawn of his well-being. And now? Now, faced with his intubated mother, her artificial breathing, her nightdress with its faded colours, he can't really forgive the salty tear that streaks his face like sea spray. Mother, don't leave me. What will I do without you? He squeezes the mother's little hand, the hand of an old child, and holds it in his own strong masculine hand. Don't let go, Mother. We're almost there. We're going to win this time, it's for sure. The prize is ours, and nobody can take it away from us. Think of the advance we'll get next time.
Life is merely passing time and the desire to be loved, nothing else, sighed the master. Life, life, life. How unbearable they were, these writers always talking about life. What do they even know of life? Poets, yes, they know about it. Other writers only imagine it. Scoundrels who climb naked onto a ledge and threaten to throw themselves off if nobody will listen to them. That's what writers are. If it wasn't for poets, who question every certainty in order to climb higher, and who extend to them the support of poetry in order to get them down, like firemen with a scared cat, life, yes, but other people's. Time passing. Oh, that was more nonsense. Time never passes if it ever did. And the future is anxiety, insomnia, and fear of dying. But before I die, I'll have what I'm due. The master angrily closed the writer's book and placed it with a little bang on the counter of the library. "I'll take this, too," he said to the bespectacled library assistant. We should know our enemy before the battle.
From an experiment conducted by the Max Planck Institute, it appears that dogs are capable of understanding and recognizing at least 200 words. Some breeds, like Border Collies, even 1,000. For now, the beginner's parrot couldn't understand a single one. A gangster who turned state's evidence and was appearing in court behind bulletproof glass. That was what the parrot looked like. But with time it would speak. Oh yes, it would speak. The beginner, who was getting his bag ready for his game of five-a-side and couldn't find his boots, was sure of that at least. The beginner's manual on the raising and care of parrots said that, if you really have no choice but to leave the bird alone, it is best to leave a radio or tape recorder on. That was why the beginner, who in the meantime had found a single boot, took from the bathroom the portable radio that enlivened his showers, tuned into a private station where they talked 24 hours a day about the most popular football team in the capital, positioned it close to the cage, put his bag over his shoulder, looked fleetingly at the parrot, and pulled the door behind him.
Today must be the first or third Friday of the month because, as agreed with the first wife, it is up to the writer to go and pick up the children. That's why the writer's SUV is parked just outside the Irish school from which in a few minutes the boy and the girl will come out, the miraculous duo resulting from the encounter of his chromosomes with those of the first wife. Two finely crafted little jewels the court preferred to entrust to their mother, a decision that even the writer found fair and reasonable. Seeing them less means enjoying them more, but above all it means having peace and quiet and enough time at his disposal to read and write, or rather to copy his mother's novels in peace. The siblings have emerged from the storms of that marriage without any obvious trauma, although it may be too early to say. In order to proclaim victory, it is necessary to wait for the cyclone of adolescence. In a few moments they will come out of school in their nice uniforms, run lightly across that no-man's land between the exit from school and the return to the family. The writer's mobile was vibrating. "Hello?" Through the invisible Bluetooth connection, a somber voice echoed in the car's loudspeakers. "We're in a meeting. We're checking the votes." "Oh? And how are they going?" "Badly. You have to come." "When?" "Right now." "But I can't right now." "Why? Where are you?" "I'm with the kids." "Say hello to them for me, and say goodbye to the prize." "Why do you say that?" "Are you coming or not?" "I'll be right there." The writer started the car. The engine fired up just as a distant bell announced the end of lessons. The SUV made its way nimbly between the parked cars and turned onto the main road. In a moment, the writer will look in the rear-view mirror and think that he's a terrible father. In a moment, the children will come out and look apprehensively for their daddy's car and won't find it. And then they will feel the atavistic fear of abandonment, and this fear will mature in their undeveloped minds until it becomes a trauma. And one day, with sweaty hands, they will recall that moment of terror on a psychiatrist's couch. Returning to the moment in question, after seeing them and realizing with a lump in the throat how lost and disappointed they look, the considerate mother or father of a classmate will offer to take them home, and they will accept, with the resignation with which an adopted child enters a new family. What if that doesn't happen? Unlikely, of course. But if it doesn't happen, didn't the boy want an iPhone with unlimited calls and data for his 10th birthday? And doesn't his mother always put at least €20 in his pocket? Let's go then. How much will it cost them to call a taxi? Come in, sit down. The publisher was sitting at a futuristic glass table in the conference room on the top floor of the publishing company's offices. Also at the table were the press officer, the designer, and his editor. "Leave us alone," the publisher dismissed his colleagues. "They're a bunch of incompetents," he said as they walked down the corridor. "Do you know what one of my recurring dreams is? I dream that I come in here with a can of petrol and set fire to everything. A huge bonfire of proofs, manuscripts, contracts, and bills." The publisher could not suppress his excitement at the thought. They went through a door to a room decorated with paintings and rugs. "And you know why I don't do it?" The publisher closed the door, walked to the desk, and sank into the armchair. "Because I don't have the guts." "What are you doing standing there? Sit down." "Listen to me. Do you or don't you realize that we're behind? 135 votes. We can't seem to budge from that. It's because compared with last year, at least a dozen are gone." "How do you mean gone?" "Dead. That's the real problem. Otherwise it'd be perfect. We'd win every year." "Why do you say perfect? They've been talking about renewal for years. A change among the voters wouldn't be a bad idea." "What do you mean, change? You really don't get it, do you? The older they are, the better. What little time they have left isn't enough to read all the books in the competition, so they have to choose, read or live. They can't do both. That's why they have to trust what we tell them. Every voter who dies is a ballot paper up in flames. One vote less for us. The younger voters aren't so easily persuaded." "I'm sorry, we're always complaining that this country is in the hands of the old, and when the young arrive, as if being young was something praiseworthy in itself. Who wouldn't like to be young? The young, your young, are the people who aren't voting for you. They think your book's an embarrassment. They're voting for the beginner. There's no use you're making that face at me. That's how things are. They've done a good job with the beginner. They've had him park his ass on the right sofas on TV and in drawing rooms. They've stuck him on the covers of women's magazines. He isn't very intelligent, but it's not vital. He's polite, good-looking, blue eyes. Women have a soft spot for him. Well, think of something. Maybe I haven't made myself clear. We've done everything. Now it's up to you to think of something." "Me? It's time we talked man to man," the publisher said, leaning forward threateningly and putting his elbows on the desk. "What are you willing to do?"
In the hotel room of a small provincial town, the beginner thinks about his day and the literary event, the umpteenth blind date his publisher had arranged for him. On the railway platform, the embarrassment of the person sent to pick up a stranger he had only seen in a photograph on the back cover of a novel, the exaggeratedly cordial welcome by the patroness of the local book club, and the certain tangible nervousness over the organisation of the event. A nervousness which, in the evening, was transformed into embarrassment, and then into melancholy, given that the event turned out so pitiful. Nobody came. Almost nobody. The frescoed hall placed at their disposal by the municipality, freezing cold, was deserted. It's one of the riskiest of situations, an author offering himself as a sacrifice to a handful of torturers who have emerged from their houses, defying the tiredness and sadness of the evening with a single intention: to see the writer, to hear the writer, to touch the writer. To have him in front of them, naked, bound to the stake of the event, a San Sebastian ready to be transfixed by the arrows of stupid questions and executed by the intelligent ones. Here he is, at last defenceless in front of his executioner, in plain clothes, stripped of his fragile armour of paper, demonstrating his fatal ignorance, his brazen mediocrity. A unique opportunity to give him the admiration and the contempt he deserves. At the hotel, it's time to sleep. The beginner goes to the window. The main square of the town looks like a bathtub without water. The sky above the dark roofs is starless. It will rain tomorrow. Back under the blankets, the beginner's final, or rather penultimate thought before turning out the light is for the girlfriend. How is she getting on with the parrot? It wasn't easy to get her to accept the presence of that black bird in her colourful little loft. To persuade her, the beginner had to exhume the old but still valid argument about moving. They'll look for somewhere new to live, somewhere more spacious. The old promise of a love nest works every time. If only he knew that the girlfriend is pregnant, he wouldn't be so flippant about it. The beginner turns out the light and falls asleep thinking, and this really is his last thought, about the hotel room in London. A bright room with lacquered furniture, the scented bathroom, the capacious bathtub, and the sanitised toilet sealed with a paper band around it, so similar to the one they put on his book with a quotation from a rave review. How different the bathroom is in this provincial hotel. The dead hairs tangled in the shower ring, the faded wallpaper. But the main difference is that the translator of his book isn't here. The translator of his book, blonde-haired, big-eyed, firm-breasted, with agile, muscular thighs that encircled him as she moaned above him, blowing her fresh, sweet breath smelling of mojito in his face. And what about that farewell kiss? That unforgettable kiss in the morning light? A kiss both brazen and shy. Yes, that's the real difference. The indelible difference between that never-to-be-repeated hotel room in London and this shabby provincial hotel room.
For the master, the night is the most difficult time. He is assailed by a flock of memories, which he tries to shake off but can't. They're on his back, tearing him to pieces. Among these hungry beasts, there is a bit of everything. The prizes he hasn't won, the recognition he hasn't obtained, the festivals that haven't invited him, and those that have invited him without thinking much of him, the pans from the critics, the books he has finished, and those he left half-finished. Poor master, he doesn't have much time left. The prize isn't just the best, it's the only way to take leave of the world with dignity. But what of the book for which he was nominated? A kind of slender literary Frankenstein, incapable of speaking, let alone of moving up the bestseller lists, assembled by emptying drawers, turning out pockets, combing through scattered sheets and notes. The master went through his house in search of unpublished material, or at least publishable material. Once you get to a certain age, the two words become synonymous. Who gives a damn, anyway? There is no modesty or shame when you're old. So many thoughts. Better to sleep. Come on. Good night, master.
What's the name of the hotel you stayed in when you were in London? The beginner switched off the electric hair clipper. He put his head round the door. The girlfriend was sitting on the bed, putting on her sandals. Why'd you ask? Because my boss has to go to London and wants a different hotel. He says he's bored with the usual hotels. The Old England Hotel.
The writer was sitting on a park bench in the morning light. His mother was in a coma, struggling between life and death in a room in a very expensive clinic. Yes, his poor mum, whom he was starting to conjugate in the past tense to get used to the idea of her passing. From the cradle, and then putting him to bed at night, she had kept him spellbound with her stories and tales, incredible stories which blossomed magically on her lips like buds on a branch, stories that she invented with naturalness and ease time after time, borrowing people they knew, relatives, friends, and transforming them into fantastic heroes, magical creatures issuing from her heated imagination. An inborn gift, a natural talent which she had exercised with passion until her child, almost an adolescent, had given her to understand that he had better things to do than listen to her fairy tales. That was why, years later, when the mother had handed him a manuscript in her neat handwriting, she had done so with a hesitation that concealed respect for her male child's wide knowledge. "I've been bored since your father left," she said, and so it was only then that the writer realized that the mother had never stopped inventing stories since the days of fairy tales, because when passions are suppressed, they don't dry up, but are practiced in secret, like heretic cults. Turning those pages feverishly by the light of his bedside lamp, he had been struck by a mixture of stinging humiliation and boundless admiration. Here it was, at last, the novel he had never managed to write. Which was why the writer had gone back to the mother, tongue-tied, and handed back the folder with his head bowed as a sign of devout repentance. "It's yours," the mother had said. "Do whatever you want with it." And he had, publishing it under his own name. If you're not capable of creating a work of art, you have to become a work of art. From the terrace of the five-star hotel, the writer and the publisher could see the whole of Rome. The golden light of sunset fell like honey on the roofs and the hanging gardens. In the distance, the profiles of the churches, the pinnacles of the monuments, the jagged foliage of the pines embraced the limits of the city. Are you listening? Sometimes I don't think you realize you're a finalist for the prize. We're doing so much for you, but you're doing nothing for us. If I fell off this terrace accidentally, said the publisher, getting to his feet and approaching the parapet, what would the newspapers write tomorrow? The publisher leant forward, beyond the parapet. Get away from there! You're scaring me! Come here! The writer got up from his chair and joined the publisher. If I fell, what would the newspapers write? They wouldn't write anything because nobody remembers publishers. They only remember writers, which is only fair. You get the glory, we get the dividends. But what if you fell? What would the papers write then? I don't know. I can tell you what they'd write. Nothing. If you fell accidentally, they wouldn't write anything. But let's say you wrote a letter and then fell off this terrace. What letter? A beautiful letter, full of anger and poetry. A letter condemning prizes and their corrupt workings, the intrigues, the slander, the backstabbing. They'd say the only true winner of the prize had died. You think so? I do. And you know why? No? If a writer kills himself, he's only doing his duty.
Between an action and a reaction, between a gesture and its consequences, everybody agrees that there is an exact relationship, but not necessarily a proportionate one. As an example of a gesture, let's take the simple light pressure of a right index finger, with the nail painted scarlet red, on a plastic surface, and indicate that gesture click or double click. As an example of a consequence, on the other hand, let's take the page of the website maps.google.it that appeared to the beginner's girlfriend as she tried to visualize the facade of the Old England Hotel, the hotel which she had booked for her boss on the beginner's recommendation. Or rather, what appeared on the screen after the girlfriend clicked on the Street View option. Because, off-centre in relation to the limp flags outside the hotel, to the left of the glittering entrance, next to a stone planter, she saw a rucksack placed on the pavement. A rucksack she thought she knew. And next to the rucksack, the figure of a man she thought she knew. A man who was holding between his hands the head of a blonde woman. A woman who, on the other hand, She was certain she did not know. A tall, slim woman, with prominent breasts beneath her dark dress. Her face up against his face, as if they were looking each other in the eyes before, or perhaps after, a languid kiss. Extracting more details would have been impossible, because of the not very high definition of the image. But it would have been pointless, because a woman can recognize her man kissing another woman, even if she's blindfolded.
Which language? Italian. The guide handed the writer a pair of headphones and a cellophane packet. Channel 1 for Italian. The writer nodded, without really understanding. He could not even have said what route he had taken to get here from the Hotel Terrace, let alone what he would do afterwards. He was so drunk that he would have stubbornly denied that he was. He got on and climbed to the light-drenched upper deck. He had been preceded only by a couple of tourists who, as they took their seats in the front, passed each other a camera with a telephoto lens. Up here, the colours of the world seemed brighter, the tones more vivid, the light clearer, more transparent. And that must be an effect of the gin, the clear alcohol that leads to levity and clear-headedness. But the noises of the bus with its big engines, the pneumatic drills on the building sites, the cars rolling over the cobbles, were becoming dark and menacing. And this was because of the rum, the dark alcohol that weighs down the senses and discourages all initiative. He staggered down the aisle to the front and sat down. Once seated, he put on the headphones, and after a couple of attempts, managed to insert the jack in the socket on the armrest. He heard a crackling. He took off the headphones, but the world outside sounded the same. In the meantime, the bus was filling up, but he didn't see anyone, didn't think about anyone. His only desire was to get moving, to break this stasis he couldn't bear much longer. Fortunately, the bus now set off. The writer took off his sunglasses and tipped his cap back. He looked at the sky, vast and impregnable above the heads of the tourists. He reached out a hand to touch it, and this time the sky did not retreat, but let itself be caressed.
On your right, the imposing brick structure of
If
the
a writer
Parrots
kills
of
himself, he's only doing his
built in
duty.
only 8 years at the end of the 2nd century AD.
You'd get all the critics on your
They
side.
could accommodate up to 8,000
Nobody would
people.
ever again be able to pan a book of yours, top of the bestseller lists, top of the general list.
Quirinale, the highest of the 7 hills.
There'll be tons of reviews. We'll reissue the complete works.
After the sack of Rome by the Goths.
Front pages of the newspapers.
Now running alongside the Circus Maximus,
Maybe a gift edition or a boxed set.
Palace of the Chancellery.
Boxed set.
Marbles plundered from the theatre of Pompey.
If it's gratuitous, it's a cowardly act. But if it's a
The
protest,
magnificence of the Castel Sant'Angelo.
think about it.
The Vatican, the oldest absolute monarchy
We're
in the
sure
world.
to win.
Piazza del Popolo.
Remember, it's a week to the ceremony. A week. You have a young wife. Your children have their whole lives in front of them. Think it over.
Palazzo Massimo, now the Museum of Civilization.
It isn't the end. It may be only the beginning. If you want to win the prize, if
That is the end of our tour.
you want to win
Thank you for choosing the Rome Open Bus.
the prize,
Goodbye.
it all depends on you.
The master was sitting on the toilet. He had the beginner's book in his hand and was looking through it in search of, let's say, inspiration. He leafed through it without interest, as if it were the phone book of a foreign city in which he did not know anybody. He looked at the pages, and they seemed to him like hieroglyphics. However hard he tried, he really couldn't grasp the meaning. Not that this was particularly surprising, given that the master did not have the slightest intention of actually reading the book. At the back he found the acknowledgements page, a very long list of acknowledgements. Naive, amorous idealists. They write acknowledgements longer than their novels and think they're in debt to the whole human race. To the writers who helped them find a publisher, to the publisher who took them on, to the friend who consoled them when they broke up with their girlfriend, they all feel it's their duty to thank everybody. A kind of pointless family tree of gratitude. At least, in his book and in the writer's, there weren't any acknowledgements. Keep it clean, keep it simple. The master turned to get the toilet paper, but found only the grey cardboard tube. He tore a page out of the beginner's book and wiped himself with the acknowledgements. As they get older, writers get better, or maybe just more ungrateful.
The girlfriend was in evening dress. Before she had started cooking, she had taken down the parrot's cage and put it on the terrace. And now, in the reconquered space of her little loft, she was nervously pacing back and forth between the oven and the table, which was laid with wine glasses and her best cutlery. With her heavily made up, swollen eyes, and the onion she had fried tonight had little to do with the swelling, she looked like a woman who had things to say. This time, what awaited the beginner, whose keys were turning at that very moment in the defective lock of the girlfriend's apartment, were unconventional weapons. One was hidden in her belly, the other beneath the lid of the plate on the perfectly laid table. "Here I am." "Sorry, darling, but they just wouldn't let me go at the bookshop." "Sit down." The beginner realised that things were serious. He sat down at the table. "I don't understand." "Eat!" The beginner summoned up courage and lifted the lid. At the bottom of the empty plate lay a strange object, a kind of plastic thermometer with one vertical line and one horizontal. "What's this?" "A pregnancy test." "What?" "I'm pregnant!" "Wait there. Let me get the second course." "But..." "Here you are. Help yourself." The girlfriend was on her feet in front of the beginner, holding with one hand a glittering silver tray with a domed lid that looked like a Trojan shield. She moved the tray closer to the beginner's face, put it right under his nose, then grabbed the lid by the knob and removed it with a theatrical gesture. The beginner just had time to see a sheet of paper imbued with the dull colours of an inkjet printer before the colours came together to form an image. A photograph of the main entrance of a hotel in London, of a rucksack on that stretch of pavement in London, and a young man and a young woman who had just kissed each other in the open air of London. Then the tray came down on his head with a furious clang. This was followed by screams and tears. "Now get out," she said. "You and that damned parrot."
When he was small, he would spend whole days playing alone on a sun-drenched veranda. Even though he could not see his mother, and for long periods was so absorbed in his games that he forgot all about her, deep down he knew that her love was watching over him. Now, in the air-conditioned room in the intensive care unit, the writer looked at his mother, lying in the bed, somehow shrunken. "What should I do, Mother?" The writer started crying. "I know you're there. Help me, Mother. I want to win. I don't know why, but this prize really is the only thing I want. It's my one wish. I don't care about the next novel. I don't want to write anymore. Or rather, I promise that if I win, I won't write another line. Yes, I know, Mother. I didn't write anything before either. But try to understand. It'll be different.
We won't write any more, you and I. I promise I'll get you published under your name. From now on, I'll let you sign everything you write.
And feeling really hot, he undid one button of his shirt and sat down again next to the bed.
I've been told that there's only one way to win. But it's a very cruel way. I mean, how can I give up everything? I have kids, a beautiful wife, a dog, a house, a publisher. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. I mean, how can anyone ask you for everything? Wake up, Mother, give me a sign. What should I do?
He looked at the mother lying in the bed. She seemed like a princess in a fairy tale grown old inside her glass case because of a thin crack that had let in the mortal breath of time. He felt his strength fail him. His knees gave way, and he could not stop himself from kneeling at the foot of the bed. The writer laid his head on the sheet and closed his eyes. He again smelt the mother's smell, a mixture of roses, beeswax, and corn, the smell his mother had had when she was young. Then he got up on the bed, edging his mum across to find a place for himself, made himself as small as possible, his legs gathered under him, his back curved, his head tilted back, and lay down next to her.
Immature, false, cowardly, bastard. Words yelled by the girlfriend echoed in the beginner's head like the gong ending a contest that hasn't gone well. A father. He was going to be a father. But did he really have to leave this apartment in obedience to the girlfriend's stern ultimatum? Was she serious? And what about the cage? After the quarrel, in the interval that had gone by since the girlfriend had gone out through the door, the beginner had forgotten all about the cage and his parrot. Now that he thought about it, all his problems had begun with the arrival of that plumed guest. The beginner went out on the terrace. The parrot was motionless and black inside his cage, as if carved out of peat, with its head under its wing, almost as if ashamed for him and for his wretched fate. If it's all your fault, He approached threateningly, but was overcome with a sense of unease. Once the adrenaline of the quarrel had worn off, a blanket of despair had fallen over him. Without the girlfriend, without the security and strength she instilled in him, he felt lost, finished. He had to find some way to repair the damage. The beginner still loved the girlfriend, her gentle tolerance, her radiant good humour, her soft skin. A woman like that deserved to be reconquered. But how? A letter. Yes, that was it. The beginner would write her a letter, an old-fashioned, irresistible, desperate, or rather heart-rending love letter, handwritten. Was he or wasn't he a good writer? He took a sheet of paper and a pen. How did you write a letter to make a woman fall in love with you? How did you talk about love? How long was it since he had last written a letter, or indeed anything by hand? But he didn't have time to go that far back, because there was suddenly a voice in the room. "Come on now, write a nice letter." The beginner wheeled round in fright, but there was nobody there. "If you can," the voice continued from its hidden pulpit. "You know why you can't write?" said the voice. "Because you don't know how to write." The beginner realised whose voice it was. The cage was empty and the door open. The perch was swaying. The parrot was perched now on the back of a chair, staring at him with a defiant air. You think you're a writer? I'm dreaming, the beginner thought. But he wasn't. You wrote a book. It came out well, but that was a lucky chance. What the hell are you talking about? And here the beginner made a fatal mistake. He replied, because if there's one sure way to make a hallucination real, it's to give it a consideration it doesn't deserve. Anybody can write a book. That's not true. The parrot flew past him and glided onto the head of the bed. You don't even know how you managed to write the first book. Of course I do. It was 3 years of hard work. Let me give you some advice. I don't want your advice. Quit writing. Quit writing. You're wasting your time. Do you ever ask yourself if you have talent? Get out, screamed the beginner. Leave me alone. I'm here to save you. Do you want success? Do you want fame? Do you want the prize? If you follow my advice, there may be some hope. The beginner left the parrot in the living room and rushed to the bathroom. For a start, you have to change publisher, because small publishers don't have distribution. The beginner emptied the canvas bag for dirty washing onto the floor. Because if you want to compete for prizes, you need a big publisher. One with lots of votes in his pocket and a good press officer and... But the parrot was unable to finish the sentence because just then the beginner came out of the bathroom carrying the canvas bag, and in a fury he threw himself on it and literally bagged it. Shutting the top of the bag tightly, with the parrot writhing inside and screaming furiously, he dragged it to the bookcase. He took a heavy dictionary from one of the shelves and slipped it into the bag, then pulled down and slipped these in too. The beginner dragged the bag onto the landing and pulled the doors shut. A faint gleam announced that dawn was on the way. The beginner parked the car at the side of the road, switched on all 4 indicator lights. With the bag on his back, he descended the embankment and reached the banks of the Aniene. With both hands, he lifted the bag and flung it into the river. In the following few days, the beginner didn't write a letter, but there were difficult phone calls, and in the end they arranged to meet in a well-known cafe in the centre. You're looking beautiful, the beginner began, clinging to the comfort of habit. But the girlfriend's look was eloquent, like an air conditioner pointed at a naked, sweaty man. Look, I haven't forgiven you. I came to talk about the baby. What I'm asking of you is a gesture. Right. I gave the parrot away. Who cares about the parrot? I've arranged to see an apartment. We can go together. The beginner showed the girlfriend a page full of ads, some of them circled with a marker. The girlfriend ignored them. I want you to give up the prize. You can't ask me to do that. I'm already a finalist. Either the baby or the prize. What do you mean? An abortion? You can't do that. Oh, yes, I can. Try to be reasonable. No, you try. You haven't been reasonable since you published that book. You've become cynical, selfish, vain. Me? You'd never have been capable of doing something like that before. Here, the beginner was wise enough to keep silent. Fortunately, you're still nobody. You haven't yet won anything. You haven't been successful. You're not famous, even though you already behave as if you were. You're paranoid. No, you're the one who needs to regain a little humility. I don't want to bring a child into this world with a father like the one I saw on Street View. You should be put away, in a clinic. That's where I'm going. To get an abortion. Are you joking? To make sure she wasn't joking, he should have looked that proud, wounded girl straight in the eye. But that was something the beginner hadn't been able to do for some time now.
Let's face it, having your books brought out by small publishers can have its advantages. It's a bit like eating in a family restaurant. The small publishing company that issued the master's books had a director, a press officer, the director's daughter, a meticulous proofreader, the director's wife, a dynamic, fully computerized copy editor, the director's daughter again, and an innovative young graphic artist, an unpaid intern. And its office was the director's apartment. In his long, foolish life, the master had betrayed everything and everyone, his friends, his wife, oh yes, even poetry, but the only person he hadn't betrayed was the director of the small publishing company. A simple, energetic man who wore sleeveless synthetic shirts and had a thick, grizzled beard, which had once been dark, rather like his past as it happens. He drove around in his noisy diesel van with a stock of titles in the back — this was his solution to the problem of distribution — attending every party, festival, fair, exhibition and book-related event, finding any mangy patch of grass he could to pitch his rickety stand. The director and the master, two foreign bodies that society had never been able to assimilate, yet they keep going. But to do what? To capture the prize? Do they really have any hope of winning? Unobserved by the world, sharing the weight of a large box filled with books, they cross the sun-drenched square, and their linked shadows are forced to follow them. As soon as they entered the bookshop, the director noticed that there was almost nobody there, and the master noticed that there was not even a poster advertising the event. The female cashier looked at this pair less with curiosity than with anxiety. The director and the master came straight to the cash desk and with a joint effort placed the big box noisily on the counter. "Shall we leave it here and you'll see to it?" "Sorry, I don't understand. See to what?" "Well, in case you don't have enough copies of the books, we've brought these." "What books?" "For the event." "Oh, clever this one, eh?" said the director with a nudge in the elbow to the master, who was looking around uneasily. "But I don't know anything about it." "Listen, signorina, don't waste our time," the master intervened. "Call your manager." The manager's on his break. Maybe I can be of help?" "Anyone but you, damn it!" The girl pressed a button and put her pale lips to a microphone. "Someone in charge to the cash desk, please." The announcement echoed around the shop like a voice in an empty stadium. The master moved away and started strolling between the shelves. In the whole shop there were a handful of potential readers. In the Italian fiction section, the master looked for his book. It wasn't there. With long strides he reached the poetry section, and at the end of a row, jammed against the wall of the shelf, he found an old book of his. His anguish eased. A middle-aged woman, hair dyed a Titian red, looked at him curiously. The master held out the book. "Do you know his work?" The woman shook her head. "He's a great poet. The greatest poet alive today." "Thank you, but I was looking for a cookery book," said the woman. The director called the master. "We can't find the person in charge and The director passed his thick fingers through his beard as if they were the widely spaced teeth of a comb. "I just thought of something. I can't remember if the event was the 15th at 1600. I hope it wasn't the 16th at 1500. In an instant, the error pierced the master's weary heart like a stiletto. "I mean, my daughter left me a note, and I couldn't find it, but I could have sworn." The master bowed his head, defeated. Then he looked up again, grabbed the microphone stem, bent it towards him, and pressed the button. Summer is coming. If you're looking for a book to read on the beach, you've found it. It's waiting for you at the cash desk in a limited edition at a discount price. Copies signed by the author.
In the days that followed his decision, the writer felt a noticeable change. The first visible sign of this change was an erection in the shower. The erection manifested itself in a prodigious manner, like a quack doctor's caravan arriving in a border town. There had been a time when sex had been for him like art, a noble and important branch of human knowledge. He had hoped that every encounter would be the ultimate one, the supreme revelatory one, the magic formula that would put an end to his painful apprenticeship and make him a real wizard. But to no avail. The erection had been the most visible of the changes, but not the only one. Just for a start, the morning toast suddenly struck him as fragrant and flavoursome. And in his dealings with people, he had regained a sense of involvement and a willingness to help, which was surprising. On Sunday, instead of sitting in his study reading the newspapers, he had offered to take the second wife and the baby for a walk. It was early, and the park was quiet and shady. The writer had offered to push the pram, and had done so with ease and naturalness, as if this, and not writing, had always been his profession. The sun tickled the baby's face, and she laughed without reason, intoxicated by sensations that were new to her. Soon afterwards she fell asleep. The writer leant over the pram. "Don't wake her!" Gently, the writer picked up the baby and held her in his arms. On his shoulder he could feel the warmth emanating from that tiny head. The writer's mobile vibrated. "Oh, can you answer that?" "It's your publisher." "What does he want?" "He says, can you drop by the office to talk about the cover?" "Tell him it's Sunday." "He says it's urgent." "Then tell him to come to our house. Tell him we'll expect him for dinner." "We'll expect you for... Hold on a minute." The second wife covered the phone with her hand. "The nanny has the day off and you start inviting people to dinner? What's the problem? I'll cook." The second wife was stunned. Since they had known each other, she had never seen her husband go into the kitchen except to look for a corkscrew. "He says, can you come to dinner? He's cooking." Yes, that's what he said."
When you're young, it's much easier to be sincere than to be convincing. It is not at all easy for the beginner to explain to the girlfriend that pulling out of the prize is much more complicated than it seems, especially on the phone. "Believe me." "I don't believe you." "If I pull out, it'll be a real mess. It'll screw everything up." "Who gives a damn?" "If I lose, will you forgive me?" "Why don't we meet?" "It's too soon." "Darling." "What?" "Tell me the truth. You never have done it. You never have had an abortion." "I don't know." "I knew it." "I really have to go now." "Do you love me? Come back to me. Do what you have to do first. Lose. Or at least try not to win."
The vegetable carbonara was a success. Free-range hen's eggs, no prosciutto, courgette lightly fried in oil, and onions. Maybe a little too delicate, according to the publisher. Maybe a little undercooked for the second wife. It was followed by a delicious Roman saltimbocca. "Where did you learn to cook?" the second wife asked him as soon as the publisher had got up from the table and gone to the bathroom. The writer struck the second wife as more affable and relaxed than she had ever seen him before. She felt a kind of quiver of excitement. He was so manly and reassuring. For the first time since the birth of the baby, she wanted to make love to him. After dinner, the second wife lay down in the baby's room, and the two men withdrew to the study. The publisher took with him the crocodile skin briefcase and the bottle of Japanese whiskey with which he had arrived. They lit 2 Havana cigars, and beneath a mushroom cloud of smoke, by the light of the desk lamp, the publisher showed the writer the proofs, then the various cover designs. "You know how many copies we're going to print?" "How many?" "To start, 200,000. "In such a short time, how will you manage?" "I bought an old printing works in Serbia. They used to print phone books under Tito. They're just waiting for a phone call from me." "I really like you, you son of a bitch." "I like you too, you bastard." Quite tipsy by now, the 2 men embraced with masculine vigor. "Then we're almost there," said the publisher when the writer had let go of him. "Yes." The writer's face clouded over. "I hope you don't mind me asking, have you already thought about how?" "That's none of your business." "All right. Besides, in art, we judge by the results, not the process."
The agreement was clear. If they wanted to get back together, he mustn't win the prize. How didn't matter. What mattered was the result. He had to lose, as the girlfriend had asked. In his notebook, the beginner had numbers his press officer had strongly advised him to call. Numbers of people whose votes counted and could alter the outcome of the prize. "Hello? Good morning. I'm calling about the prize. We met at the presentation in the theatre?" "What? No, the other one. The young one. That's right. Well, I was calling to..." "Oh, you've already voted for me." No, of course I believe you. It's just that, actually, I wanted to ask you not to vote for me." "What? Am I joking?" "Well, yeah. Of course I am."
"We're not moving," said the director of the small publishing company, beating on the steering wheel with his fist. "What time is it?" 6 o'clock. We should have been there by now." The van, once white, now blackened by diesel fumes, turned onto the old Roman road. "Is there really any point to these things? I mean, what's the point of presenting a poetry book to a rowing club? Don't worry, that's my job." The director accelerated, and a light came on the dashboard. "No! What is it?" "The radiator. The water's overheating." "Now what do we do?" "It's the washer on the cylinder head. I was supposed to change it." "Look for a drinking fountain." The director braked. A big scooter passed him with a roar. "You go and get the water. I'll look for a rag to open the valve." It was a quiet street. Beyond the automatic gates there were glimpses of well-tended drives, guard dogs, and big, powerful cars. The master filled the bottle and started back towards the van. On the way, he slipped on something sticky, lost his balance for a moment, thinking he'd been betrayed by his wet shoes. "Here." The master held out the bottle to the director, who took it, his head still stuck under the bonnet. A cloud of white smoke, like a lighting effect in a disco, billowed from the engine. The 2 men avoided it with a timely leap backwards. They waited for the water in the radiator to stop boiling. Then the director topped up the water, slammed the bonnet shut, and the 2 of them got back in the van, hot and weary. "Bloody hell! What's that stench?" "What stench? I can't smell..." A foul smell of shit seemed to be trapped in the passenger compartment, as if a demon had suddenly appeared from the sulphurous pit of hell. The 2 men looked at each other in embarrassment, each secretly hoping he was not the source of that stink. Unfortunately, one of them had to be, and it wasn't the director. The master hadn't slipped because of the wet ground. "They say it brings good luck." "What do you mean, good luck? You have the evil eye." I don't believe in such things. I want you to get out now. Go on, move. Get that muck out of here. I can't breathe." The master got out of the van, found a patch of soft grass and started scraping away like a rooster. "Let's go get a move on," the director roared from the van. "We're an hour late." But the master was wearing a pair of old but magnificent Timberlands with soles like tank tracks. He found a piece of wire and began to pick at the cracks. "I'm going to leave you here." The director started the engine and set off again. "No, wait!" The master ran after him barefoot. The director slammed on the brakes and let him catch up. The master, hair dishevelled, fringe sticking to his forehead, hoisted himself on board, panting. "Oh, what about my shoes?" "Leave them here. Am I supposed to come barefoot? How do you think Jesus Christ preached? He was a prophet. And what are you? A poet. Better still, they forgive poets everything." From the edge of the little wall, the master's shoes watched the white van disappear in a cloud of black smoke, like a squid in its own ink.
The writer was hesitating in front of his open wardrobe. He was choosing the garments he would wear for the great moment. That was what he had decided to call it, because it sounded more solemn and reassuring. He took out the magnificent morning suit in which he had remarried and put it on. The trousers were uncomfortably snug. The jacket was tight across the back, and the sleeves were short. The writer looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a mafioso at a funeral. He quickly undressed, and, with an excitement that soon became frenzy, he emptied the wardrobes and drawers. Shirts, sports jackets, polo shirts, jeans, trousers, socks and ties flew around the room, his inexhaustible wardrobe piling up on the bed. After a hard struggle with that heap of clothes, the writer emerged with some clearer ideas: a white shirt, cream-coloured trousers, and a blue jacket. He looked at himself in the mirror again. He was the very image of an immortal writer, with an elegance that was considered but not premeditated, a marriage of tradition and creativity, and a touch of the dishevelled. Perfect. This was how he would go to his appointment. All he needed now were the shoes. All was putting it lightly, because when the great moment came, he would need shoes that were appropriate, elegant, but comfortable. Because you can't die in uncomfortable shoes. So the writer opened his shoe cupboard and tried on all the footwear he had, finally choosing a kind of closed sandal, practical but inappropriate to the great moment. Then he went into the living room, where the dog was lounging in his basket. He waved the lead, and the dog overcame the atavistic laziness imprinted in the genes of its vagabond race, and came trotting towards him. And so they went out to have a dress rehearsal for the great moment. Have you thought about how? The publisher had asked. Had he thought about it? Since the possibility had been presented to him, officially so to speak, he hadn't thought about anything else. It was a task, a job to be carried out with almost clerical zeal. Suicide. Yes, for the first time that word had lit up in his mind like the sign over a casino, and seeing it flashing in the darkness scared him. The writer, impeccable in his light trousers and blue jacket, and the dog, its tail erect and its muzzle well forward, were crossing the park. Over the past week, he had thought a lot about how he would do it. If he really didn't want a complete break with tradition, why not go for the classic method, barbiturates? But what was the lethal dose? And what if somebody arrived in time and pumped out his stomach? Also to be dismissed was the idea of flinging himself off a flyover, because it was too ostentatious and it would inevitably snarl up the traffic. While jumping out of his own window was impracticable because he lived on the ground floor, and gas was out of the question because he had a state-of-the-art halogen oven. How then? Maybe there was only the rope. No, he had to die more quickly. They walked for a long time, past the windows of closed shops, down the traffic-clogged street as far as the underground stop. The writer went down into the station, bought 2 tickets, one for himself and one for the dog, and plunged into the warm intestines of the underground. The writer looked into the dark mouth of the tunnel. From that tube came a distant clanking sound, like the shuffling of a chain gang. A breath emerged from the tunnel, ruffling the writer's hair. How long can a minute last? Why wait? What if instead of a dress rehearsal for the great moment had arrived? The writer thought about the second wife, but not the first, thought about the baby, but not the boy and the girl, and about the publisher, and about the prize. Yes, quite intensely about the prize. As the brakes of the train bit into the rails, the writer had a vision. The big posters in the station no longer showed a bottle of perfume and a model with a knowing smile, but the cover of his book. The train came down the tunnel, making the arched roof shake. The writer took another step, and the dog dug in its heels. The leather lead became taut. The train emerged from the tunnel like an arrow of steel and light, and the writer fell. There are dogs that would die for their masters. There really are. Not this one. Even if it had never seen an underground train before, it knew at what point to start pulling. To pull with all its pectorals bulging, swollen, its back arched, its tail pointed downwards, and its claws scraping on the platform. To pull with its nose wet and its tongue out. To pull so hard that the writer fell. But not forwards, backwards, hitting his coccyx painfully on the platform as the train stopped and the doors were thrown wide open, revealing this ridiculous man to the passengers. No, those shoes really weren't right. As he returned home with his lower back aching, the writer stopped again halfway along the bridge. He placed his hands on the parapet and looked down. There was the solution, simple and economical. No branches, no tunnels. Water. The Tiber itself would welcome him to its bed and cover him forever with its age-old waters. Pleased to have found such a simple but spectacular solution, the writer could already imagine the item on the 1 o'clock news, with the reporter on the bridge, the Castel Sant'Angelo in the background, and the camera panning over the barges and the firemen's dinghies as they dragged the river in search of his body. Talking of which, who would find him? Maybe a fisherman from Fiumicino, or a lifeguard from Ostia. Oh, God, let's hope not. Because in such things, every detail counts. You can't just be found by the first person who happens to pass by. Perhaps the best thing would be not to be found at all, and the mystery would become a legend. Brilliant. He'd almost reached home and was about to go through the gate when he noticed something. A pair of shoes on the edge of the low wall. He went closer. They were beautiful timberlands, broken down by time and shaped by thousands of steps, but still in good, in fact, excellent condition. Was it a joke? Or the missing accessory to complete the outfit for the great moment? Who had left them here? And why? When he picked them up, he at least discovered why. A lethal whiff of shit caught him by the throat. The writer instinctively moved the shoes away from him and put them back on the low wall. The dog went closer and started sniffing them and wagging its tail. "Don't even think about it." Now, when fate shows its hand so clearly, all you can do is submit to its omnipotent will. That was why the writer had taken those shit-smeared shoes home. There was nothing that could not be solved with a pair of rubber gloves and a steel brush.
The beginner didn't think he could pull it off. That was what always happened. He didn't think he could pull it off, and then he pulled it off. In every single case. This time, though, it was different. He had started to feel scared. It was the kind of fear that comes over a tennis player when he has 3 match points in hand and then chalks up 3 consecutive double faults. Or a man who at last finds the woman he's been dreaming about naked in his bed. In other words, the fear of winning. But the fear of winning is only the most presentable aspect of the desire to lose. Difficult? Twisted? Maybe. But that's how it is. So, faced with the terrifying possibility of being left by the girlfriend, the beginner started to feel that he had a good chance of winning. A growing, definite, confident chance of winning. What he needed now was reassurance that he wouldn't win. He needed someone who could get him out of trouble. And he became convinced that the only person who could understand his situation was the patroness of the prize. The distinguished lady who pulled the strings, hatched literary plots and conspiracies, administered a huge cultural inheritance and maintained relations with the sponsor. He would talk to her openly. The way you do with a mother, no. With an aunt, no. With a grandmother. He would tell her everything. The betrayal, the incredible way in which it had been discovered on Google Maps Street View, the baby they were expecting, the dilemma, or better still, the blackmail. Everything. From first to last. And she would listen. She would understand. She would help him. He felt sure of that. Confident. Because nothing bad can happen to someone who tells the truth.
The evil eye, his publisher had said. The master didn't believe in such things. He was a man of letters, a man of culture. And yet he couldn't completely leave the irrational out of his cosmology. If you looked at it the right way, he worked with the irrational. What was poetry if not a spark of irrationality, a match struck on the bare walls of logic? Besides, things had been going so badly for him lately, it was better not to take any risks. He had been given the name of a witch by the woman who came to clean a couple of times a month. The witch wasn't a real witch. She was a woman from the south who practiced her profession from home, her kitchen, to be precise. In the end, the master had found it. The witch lived in a bleak apartment building on the edge of the city. She spoke with a strong Apulian accent and kept her heavy breasts propped up on the kitchen table. On the table were a plate containing water, a cruet of oil, and a pot of salt. You could have used these things for a salad, or to take away the evil eye, depending on what you were hungry for. The witch had first wanted to see his money. The master would have liked to see it too. Then, uttering the name of the father, had marked the plate with an upside-down cross. Then she had poured 3 drops of oil onto the plate. In contact with the water, the oil, instead of floating, had somehow vanished, an unmistakable sign of the evil eye. The witch had uttered an arcane formula full of incomprehensible words. Then she had poured oil into another plate of water, and this time the drops had stayed on the surface, like floating coins. "Do you want to know who did it?" she had asked. The master was surprised. He didn't know you could actually trace the evil eye back to the person who had given it to you. The witch had told him it was only possible to find out the initials of the person, but that had been enough to remove any lingering doubt from the master's mind. It was another of the finalists of the prize. "Do you wish him harm?" Yes." "Do you want to do him harm? Can you turn the evil eye against him?" "No. A more powerful magic." "What magic?" "A spell. I need his shoes and a nail from a coffin." A nail from a coffin? And where would I find that?" The witch opened a drawer and took out a handful of nails. From them she chose one that was bent and rusty and put it on the table. "The nail is 100 euros. "Really? And the spell is 1,000. And without the spell?" "What? No, nothing. I was joking." "I wasn't. You don't joke with the evil one. 1,000. With what we'll do to him, he'll never again be able to hurt you. Do you have 1,000 euros?" "I have them." No more than that, but he did have 1,000. "Bring me the shoes." An evanescent, intoxicating darkness was sniffing at him with its wet nose like a weasel, and he opened his mouth wide and swallowed it in spoonfuls. It swelled his lungs, heavy with the steamroller of night. This darkness belonged to the master. The gate had opened with a click. He had stopped next to a garden spotlight and taken a dirty sheet of paper from his pocket, an arabesque of confused lines traced in pen, the map made for him by the Filipino. He had continued following the map and was now facing a door. Behind it slept his enemy, the man who wanted to win at all costs, the man who was about to get a taste of a mad poet's revenge. The house was all on one floor, large rooms, clear, scented wooden floors, leather sofas like living creatures. In the kitchen he spotted a dark sarcophagus, opened it, and in a shower of light saw a smoked salmon as plump as a ham, truffles in a glass jar, and rows of wine bottles stored horizontally like mortar shells. This was the diet of a best-selling writer. The master closed the fridge door. He wouldn't find what he was looking for in the kitchen. To get the shoes, he had to enter the wolf's lair. He crossed the living room, ventured along the corridor. At the end, to the right, the master bedroom. The master took a deep breath, switched off the torch, and pulled the door handle down. Husband and wife were in the nuptial bed. Here was the writer, with hundreds of thousands of copies read and translated throughout the world, lying on his back, his arms crossed over his chest, as motionless as a corpse. Here was the second wife, and between them the baby. The master looked at the royal dynasty immersed in slumber. They were sleeping a remote, aristocratic sleep, chrysalids waiting to become butterflies. He could kill all three of them. It would be like a palace revolution. But he didn't. He needed only one thing, just one thing, and he would go. The spell would deal with the rest. The master dimly made out a valet stand, with a jacket and a shirt hanging all neat and tidy, and at the foot the reason why the master had come so far, the writer's shoes. The master advanced, bent down, and took them.
The beginner is in the toilet of a bar. His mobile is ringing. It's the girlfriend. He takes a deep breath and answers. How'd it go? To get the answer to that, let's step back in time and imagine we are a robin that has just come to rest on a windowsill in the apartment of the patroness of the prize. Look, the beginner is just about to be received. The apartment is crowded. It's tea time. The butler greets him, then goes into the main room and whispers something in the patroness's ear. The lines on her face crease, then relax. The patroness is wearing a cream-coloured tailored suit and white shoes with gold buckles, and she keeps her legs parallel and twisted to one side. She is holding a flute of champagne. Reluctantly, she stands up and follows the butler. Now here she is, receiving the young candidate for the prize of which he is the undisputed heart and soul. The beginner tells his story. He tells her the girlfriend is pregnant, then confesses his betrayal, then takes a step forward and refers to the blackmail and his fear of winning, but above all of losing what is dearest to him right now, that germ of life in the girlfriend's belly. He is speaking like a father, or even like a mother. He gets emotional. The patroness listens to him, while the ice melts in her first spritzer, and in a second. Can you help me not to win? He asks. The patroness looks at him, full of understanding. Her eyes are shining, her hair motionless, trapped in a nest of lacquer. She moves closer. The beginner thinks she wants to tell him something in confidence. The beginner smells her breath. It's reminiscent of faded flowers. She passes a hand through his hair. The beginner barely has time to turn his face away before a kiss, sticky with lipstick, is imprinted on his cheek. He runs away. The patroness regains her composure and returns to her guests. The robin has seen too much. It flies away. Now, we can return to the toilet of the bar in which we left our young writer. Well, how did it go? Okay. Will they vote for you? I don't think so.
Getting dressed in the morning, the writer could not find his shoes. In the afternoon he went to a medical supply shop and bought some clogs. He could go to the great moment with immaculate clogs on his feet. Even death requires maximum cleanliness. On the day of the ceremony, at 8:30 on the dot, the publisher arrived at the writer's house in his freshly washed and hand-waxed Porsche Cayenne. The writer greeted him with a plain nod. Then they both loaded the pushchair in the boot. The writer kissed the baby on the forehead. He hugged the second wife and kissed her too. When she'd got into the car, the two men embraced in a manly way, and with the dexterity of a drug courier, the publisher dropped an envelope into the writer's jacket pocket. "It's all there. You just have to copy it," the publisher whispered. When he was alone, the writer walked through the empty spaces of his house, as if floating in the light. He left home, took a taxi, and asked the driver to drop him at a florist's near the clinic. He bought a large quantity of flowers. In the clinic, he arranged the flowers around the bed and kissed the mother on the forehead. Thank you for everything you gave me. I'm doing this for you, Mother. He closed the door again and left. By now it was lunchtime. The writer had booked the best table in his favourite restaurant. He ordered a Pinot Grigio as a starter red crayfish, as a first main course spaghetti with fresh razor clams, and for the second a sea bream he'd seen buried in ice. To finish off, he had pear and chocolate pie and a decaffeinated coffee. He didn't even look at the bill. When he got home, it was after 4, and he had planned everything for 6. There was no time to waste. Death can wait, but only up to a point. He called the second wife to find out how they were. She said they'd had a wonderful day and that they would be back in an hour in time for a shower before they went with him to the ceremony. She told him not to worry. Everything would work out as it was supposed to. Those were her exact words. Then she hung up. He went into his study and opened the envelope the publisher had slipped into his pocket. There was a letter. The farewell letter prepared by the publisher. All he had to do was copy it on the computer and email it to a few selected contacts. He read it. It was about corrupt prizes, mercenary critics, ignorant readers, mediocre writers, how pointless it all was. Writing, reading, and what a relief it was to say farewell to such a world. He sighed. No, things weren't like that. In his long career he had met talented people, honest writers, shrewd critics, sincere readers. Not many, but he had met them. This letter was rubbish. A disgrace. Surely he could do better. If there was a single cell, a single sequence of amino acids in his whole body that made him a writer, now was the moment to demonstrate it. He cracked his fingers, faced the blank page. There is no man who, a moment after switching off the light, isn't assailed by a question. Am I an imposter? Do I really deserve what life has given me? And there is no way to dismiss this question without turning the light back on. We each of us have, deep in our soul, a fragile urn that contains the answer. But since we are convinced that the answer is even more painful than the question, we prefer to ignore it. That is how we lead our lives, either with studied caution or wild recklessness, either taking great care not to break the urn, or knocking against everything and everyone, and hoping that a glancing blow will smash it to pieces. Unfortunately, or fortunately, none of us knows if, how, and when our urn will break. And in the case of most human beings, their secret goes to the grave with them. But my urn is broken, and now that I know the answer, I can remain no longer. Am I an imposter? Excuse me, I have to turn on the light. It had all come in one go, without hesitation or correction. He read it again. It was concise and effective. He wasn't so bad after all. What a pity it had writer's block all these years. He sighed and sent the letter as an email attachment to all the contacts in his address book. Then he switched off the computer and his mobile and went out. The great moment had come. The writer was walking alongside the Tiber. It was getting towards evening. He stopped beneath the arches of a bridge. He undressed solemnly and laid his clothes on a bench. Then, as naked as Adam, he looked at the sunset and the yellow-brown river calling him to it. He put one foot in the water. It was really cold. Even dying has its disadvantages.
This is a victory without victors. The party we would have preferred not to go to. The article we would never have wanted to write. For once, the world of letters is speechless. It is a few hours to the proclamation of the winner. Everything is ready in Villa Nike. The lawn is like a billiard table, the grounds lit up as if in daylight, the tables allocated, the waiters lined up behind the buffet. Politicians, journalists, writers, and figures from the fashion world and from cinema and theater are strolling about the grounds, exchanging the usual wishes and predictions. It is an event like any other, a prize ceremony like any other. And yet it isn't. That something is not right is clear from the nervousness at the table of the publishing company that has won the prize most often over the years. The publisher, who is looking very elegant in his pinstripe suit, has not touched his food, nor has he issued any statements. The press officer's face is drawn as he paces the grounds nervously in search of a secluded corner to talk into his mobile phone. The dinner is served, but there is still no sign of the writer. His plate is empty. He has not even appeared for the usual interviews. There is irritation among the organizers and the members of the Academy, and disappointment among the photographers and cameramen, who in his absence have to make do with the other two finalists. The host takes his time as he recalls the names of past winners and thanks the sponsors. Then it is the turn of the mayor, who says that the prize is part of the history of our country. The final vote has not started yet. The audience are getting restless. The press officer is conferring with the publisher, who finally stands up and goes to the president of the Academy. He whispers something in his ear. The president goes to the chairman of the jury. There is a heated discussion at the back of the platform. The assistants come and go frantically. But now it is obvious that something is wrong. But what? In the end, after much consultation, the host gets up on the platform. This is going out live on the media. He looks ashen, and his voice breaks as he reads a brief statement. The writer has taken his own life. There is a murmur of dismay, incredulity, sadness, then silence. A grim silence, like that preceding a storm. Everyone freezes like statues in a living nativity. Mobile phones start ringing all together like crazed cicadas. The news is out and people are calling. They have heard about it on television. They want confirmations or denials. Rumors are already circulating. It is said that there is a suicide note, although it has not yet been broadcast. After a while, the host returns to the platform. Yes, it is true, the note has arrived. It is more than a note, it is a letter. The chairman gets up on the platform and reads it. A few people weep, others laugh, others still remain silent. The prize committee gather. Something like this has never happened before. The rules do not even have any provision for it. After what seems an interminable time, the president of the Academy moves away from the group and gets up on the platform to make an announcement. After much consultation, the jury has decided to award the prize to the writer in his memory. It has been a difficult decision, and the controversy begins raging almost immediately. The other two finalists are besieged by the press. It is almost midnight, and the journalists who are waiting to file their stories can wait no longer. From police headquarters comes the news that some clothes have been found on the banks of the Tiber, and the writer's wife has identified them. They are her husband's. The search is beginning for his body. Villainaike is emptying. The west wind is starting to blow. The sultry heat is fading, but not the grief.
"4 months after the ceremony, in a modest casket in the middle of the nave, lay the body of the master. A hurried ceremony in a church on the outskirts of the city. On the coffin, a shabby wreath of flowers and a collection of poetry. In Rome it was late autumn. There was wind, and swollen clouds scurried across the sky. The publisher descended the steps with his hands in his pockets. The master had died alone, he thought, just as he had lived. A short circuit. That's what he'd heard. A fuse had blown as he was inserting the plug of a vacuum cleaner. The shock had been so great that when the neighbour had found him, she hadn't managed to prise his hand away from the handle as if they had been soldered together into one mass. Definitely far too prosaic for the death of a poet. Fortunately, there are also happy things to report. The beginner's girlfriend had given birth to a lovely, healthy baby girl who weighed 3 kilos, 200 grams at birth. The beginner isn't writing another novel, but has started work on a script for a not very good TV drama series. He is being well paid, but sometimes, before falling asleep, the thought hits him that he is wasting his time and ought to go back to literature. And there's no reason to suppose he won't, sooner or later. Outside the ring road, between uncultivated fields and abandoned warehouses, where the city comes together with the countryside without agreeing, is a house with a satellite dish on the roof. There are no other buildings in the immediate vicinity, just a vineyard with withered grapes and a greenhouse with a shattered roof. And to judge from the flyers heaped in the letterbox, the occupants can't be very sociable people. The gate is open, and the publisher has driven his Porsche into the courtyard. He opens the boot and takes out 2 plastic bags with the logo of a big supermarket chain. He puts them down on a doormat, pulls out a bunch of keys, opens the door, picks up the bags again, and goes inside. The light is off. The television, though, is on. A man sitting in an armchair with his back to the door. He is staring at the screen. "Why are all the lights off? What are you doing in the dark?" The publisher puts the bags down on the table next to a typewriter and a ream of paper. He turns the lights on. The room is untidy and smells musty. In a corner, an empty cage with the door open. It was the former tenant's. He had a magpie. "I got you a lot of shopping." The publisher takes the bags into the kitchen. The man does not reply. He is motionless, watching the TV. The popular evening quiz is on. "Pasta, tomatoes, tuna, beans." The publisher fills the cupboards, making a great racket with the cans. "Shh!" The man in the armchair wants to hear the program. The contestant has to guess the identity of the mystery man just from his physical features. The presenter reads, "For 50,000 euros, this man is a handwriting expert, makes Christmas cribs, tests mozzarella cheeses. I brought some newspapers. Shall I leave them here?" "Wherever." "I say he makes Christmas cribs," the competitor ventures. "Is that your final answer?" the presenter asks. "Imbecile." "What?" "It's obvious he doesn't have the hands for it." "Who?" "Him." The man indicates the screen with his chin. The publisher turns to look. "For 50,000 euros, do you make Christmas cribs?" asks the presenter. The music draws out the sense of expectation. "No, "I don't make Christmas cribs," the mystery man replies. "What a pity," the presenter says. "You've just lost 50,000 euros. What an idiot." The man turns. We know him too well to introduce him again. He is a man who was afraid of dying. "Were you at the funeral?" "Yes." "Was anybody there?" "A few people, not many." "What about mine? When are we doing it?" "You can't have a funeral without a body." "You promised." "I'm working on it. Give it time. There's a bishop we're publishing a book by. Maybe he'll agree to." "I'm tired of staying here. When are the papers coming?" "It's a matter of days, a month at the most." "A month?" "Weeks, I hope. I want to be on the island by Christmas. I saw the satellite weather report. Slightly cloudy, 31 degrees centigrade. You'll be there. Don't worry." "And the book?" "Still on top." "How many copies so far?" 900,000. "How's your mother?" "She's making progress. Started writing again. She's the ideal writer." The publisher smiles. The writer doesn't. "I'd like to see her before I leave." "That's not a good idea. She's still quite poorly." "How are the kids?" "They're fine. I'm taking them to the mountains for a bit of skiing." "What about the baby?" "We're taking the nanny. But in a couple of years she'll be wearing skis herself. Children never fall. They have a low center of gravity." "Right. What are your sleeping arrangements at the hotel?" "Shall I open the window just a little? It's stuffy in here." "It's all the same to me." The publisher goes to the window and opens it. It's cold outside. The countryside is bare and bleak. The writer also stands and looks outside. What he sees is a snow-white beach and a turquoise sea. "I've started writing again." "Oh?" "By typewriter, like the old days." "Will you let me read some of it?" "Not at the moment." "Can you tell me anything about it?" "No, but it's coming along." I'm pleased. If there's nothing else, I should go. Go. I'll send you a postcard. The publisher goes towards the door, then stops. Shall I close the window? I'll close it. The writer is still looking outside. In the distance, a dark stripe in the emerald green. The barrier reef. All right. The publisher leaves. The quiz has finished. The writer switches off the TV. There is a sudden loud noise, something falling. The writer turns. It's a vase which has fallen to the floor and smashed. On the windowsill sits a bird. A black parrot. The parrot spreads its wings, flies cleanly, expertly, and soundlessly across the room and into the empty cage, and lands on the perch. The man and the bird exchange looks. They know each other.
In The Parrots by Filippo Bologna, translated by Howard Curtis, the beginner was read by Sam Ricks, the writer by Anthony Head, and the master by Oliver Ford Davis. It was abridged for radio by Richard Hamilton, and the producer was Simon Richardson.